My name is Valerie. And the morning everything fell apart, I was sitting at my kitchen table in a cardigan that still smelled like fabric softener, drinking coffee that had gone cold, reading a text from my brother that said, "Surprise. Consider this payback, LOL." I stared at it for a long time, long enough that the coffee got even colder, long enough that the notification light on my phone blinked twice more and I still didn't move. Then I opened my banking app, the joint account, the one my parents had convinced me to open 3 years ago so we could pool resources for the house, showed a balance of 11.420. 2 days earlier, it had $31,800 in it. I put my phone face down on the table. I looked out the window at my neighbor's oak tree, the one that drops acorns on my car every fall. A squirrel was running along the fence. Normal Thursday morning. Birds doing bird things. Sun coming through the window at that low winter angle that turns everything gold, and I thought, very clearly, okay, so that's how we're doing this. Let me back up, because none of this makes sense without the context. And the context is the kind of thing you don't fully see until you're sitting across from a therapist 2 years later and she tilts her head and says, "Do you notice the pattern here? I'm the oldest of three. My brother, I'll call him my brother, because that's all he is to me now, is 2 years younger. My younger sister is 5 years younger, and has always been the one my parents protected, excused, and quietly preferred. I figured that out around age 12 and spent the next decade convincing myself I was wrong. I was not wrong. My dad is a retired electrician. My mom worked part-time at a dental office until her back gave her trouble. Neither of them is a bad person in the conventional sense. They paid their bills, fed us, showed up to school events, but there's a particular kind of damage that comes from parents who love you conditionally. Not cruelly, not loudly, just quietly, in the way they pause before answering when someone asks if they're proud of you, in the way they CC your sibling on emails that were meant for you, in the way your achievements become the setup for a conversation about someone else's potential. I moved out at 22, got my accounting degree, landed a decent job at a mid-sized logistics firm in Charlotte, worked my way up to senior financial analyst by 28. I was careful with money. I had a Roth IRA and a 3-month emergency fund and a spreadsheet I updated every Sunday night. I was, by every measure I could control, doing fine. The joint account was my mother's idea. She brought it up at Thanksgiving 3 years ago when I was 29. My parents had owned their house outright for years, but the property taxes had gone up, the HVAC needed replacing, and they'd been dipping into savings more than they should. My brother had been living with them on and off, just until he gets on his feet, which had been the explanation for the past 4 years at that point. My sister had 2 kids and a husband who worked in HVAC sales, and they were fine. Not rich, but fine. My mother said, "We were thinking, if you could just help anchor the account, just to make sure the house stuff gets covered, it would give us such peace of mind." I said I'd think about it. My father said, "It would really mean a lot. You've always been the responsible one." And there it was. The compliment that's also a trap. You're the responsible one, which really means we are going to rely on you in a way we would never rely on the others. And if you say no, you are failing a test that was never announced. I opened the joint account in January. I transferred $10,000 as an initial contribution. I set it up so I could monitor transactions. Told my parents it was for household expenses only, taxes, utilities, repairs. I made my mother look me in the eye and agree. She agreed. She seemed genuinely grateful. The first year was fine. They used it correctly. Property taxes, a new water heater, the HVAC in March. I felt good about it, honestly. I felt like I was doing something real and useful, like I was being a daughter in a way that mattered. Then my brother moved back in full-time. Then the Venmo transfer started. Not to household accounts, to his personal account. $200 here, $400 there. Small enough that I almost missed them. I called my mother. She said he'd needed gas money. He'd needed groceries. He was going through a hard time. I said, "That's not what this account is for." She said, "Family helps each other." I said, "I am helping. That's why the account exists. But I need you to use it the way we agreed." She went quiet the way she always goes quiet when she doesn't want to argue but also doesn't intend to change. I set up alerts on every transaction over $50. 6 months later, when I documented 11 separate transfers to my brother's personal Venmo, I called a family meeting over video chat because I lived 2 hours away. My father sat with his arms crossed. My brother said he'd pay it back. My mother said I was being weirdly controlling about money. My sister, who had been silent, typed in the chat, "Why does everything have to be a whole thing with you?" I closed the Venmo connection. I thought that fixed it. What I didn't realize was that I'd shown them exactly where my limits were, and they'd noted it. By the third year, I'd contributed a total of $31,800 to the joint account across regular deposits and a few larger transfers for a roof repair and a plumbing emergency. My brother was still living at home. My parents' household had essentially become something I was subsidizing, and I had told myself a story about it, that this was temporary, that they would stabilize, that I was doing the right thing even if no one acknowledged it. I want to be honest about something. I knew something was wrong. Not that specific thing, not the betrayal that was coming, but something. I felt it in the way my mother changed the subject when I asked for a financial update. I felt it when my brother started being unusually friendly on our calls, asking about my job, saying things like, "You really have it together, Val." People who are about to do something to you are often kind right before they do it. I didn't trust the kindness, but I also didn't act. That's the part I've had to sit with. At the end of February, I got notification that my firm was sending me to a 3-day conference in Atlanta. I told my family I'd be away and out of contact during the days. Standard professional trip. I thought nothing of it. I was wrong to think nothing of it. On the second day of the conference, between the morning keynote and a breakout session on risk analysis, I felt my phone buzz in my jacket pocket. Then again. Then 3 times in quick succession. I stepped into the hallway. The alerts were from my bank, transactions on the joint account. 6 of them, in 20-minute intervals, $3,000 for $5,000 for $5,000 for towers, $3,000 for Tides, $6,100, $9,000 for Timed. I stood in that hotel hallway in my conference lanyard and my blazer, and I watched the balance drain in real time on my screen. Then the text came from my brother. "Surprise. Consider this payback." Lol. A minute later, one from my mother. "We needed this. You should have been more generous when we asked. Don't make this worse than it needs to be." And then my sister, who I had always told myself was neutral, who I had protected from every family argument, sent a single gif, a woman waving goodbye, with the caption, "Enjoy Atlanta." I walked to a chair against the wall and I sat down in it. Someone from the conference passed me and said, "You okay?" And I said, "Yes, just checking messages." And they kept walking. I sat there for 4 minutes. I know because I looked at the time when I sat down and looked again when I stood up. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Patricia, and she is 61 years old and has the energy of someone who has seen every possible version of human financial dysfunction and stopped being surprised about 20 years ago. I'd used her for a contract review once and kept her number. I told her what happened, clearly without crying, which surprised me, and by the time I finished, she was already typing. "Do you have documentation of all your contributions?" she asked. "Yes. Every transfer, every deposit. I have it in a spreadsheet going back 3 years. Transaction alerts for today? All 6. Screenshots already." A pause. "Okay. Don't call your family yet. Don't send anything. Go back to your conference. I'm supposed to present tomorrow. Then present tomorrow. Grief later. Right now, I need you to forward me everything and not touch that account." I forwarded everything. I went back inside. I sat through 2 more sessions. I took notes. I do not remember what they were about. That night, from my hotel room, I filed a fraud report with the bank. Patricia had coached me on exactly what to say. These were unauthorized transfers. I had documentation of the account's intended use. I could provide written agreements. The bank flagged the account within 2 hours. By morning, the funds were frozen, pending investigation. What I had not told my family, the joint account was not, in fact, where I kept the majority of my savings. I had never told them that. They believed, because they had never asked, and because I had never asked, and because I had never corrected the assumption, that $31,800 was the bulk of what I had. It was not. It was 3 years of deliberate, careful contributions to an account I had kept specifically for their household needs. The rest of my money had been in accounts they had never seen and never had access to. They emptied a bucket. They thought they'd emptied a lake. I found out what they were planning it for after the fact, from a cousin who felt guilty enough to text me. My parents and my brother had booked a trip to Las Vegas. Not a weekend trip. 10 days. My brother had put down a deposit on a rental in Henderson. My sister and her husband were joining for the first 4 days. They had apparently been planning this for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. While my mother was calling me on Sunday evenings to ask how I was doing and tell me my brother was really trying this time, she was sitting in the same house where they were planning to use my money to fund a 10-day vacation. The text from my brother. Consider this payback. I turned over in my mind for a long time, trying to figure out what he felt he was owed payback for. I never fully landed on an answer. Sometimes I think he resented me simply for having made different choices, for having left, for having built something he hadn't. That kind of resentment doesn't need a specific injury, it just needs proximity and an opportunity. He found the opportunity. He fought the opportunity. He thought it was the end of the story. It was not. Patricia moved fast. By the time my family landed in Las Vegas, I know from their Instagram posts, which they did not think to make private, the account was frozen. A civil claim had been filed, and I had sent a certified letter to my parents' address outlining the documented misuse, the total amount, and my intent to pursue full recovery plus legal costs. My father called me from Las Vegas. I let it go to voicemail. He said I was overreacting. He said this was a family matter. He said, "You're going to regret doing this legally. You're making enemies you don't need." My mother called an hour later. She cried. She said she thought I would understand once they explained. I did not call back. My brother sent a series of texts, ranging from conciliatory to aggressive and back, over the course of about 4 days. I did not respond to any of them. What I did do, I kept working. I presented at that conference. I flew home. I met with Patricia twice. I provided documentation. I slept well, which surprised me. I thought the betrayal would keep me up. But there's something almost clarifying about having the thing you feared confirmed. The uncertainty was gone. I knew exactly what I was dealing with, and exactly what I was dealing with, and exactly what I was doing about it. The bank investigation completed in 3 weeks. Because I had documentation of the account's purpose, records of all my contributions, and text evidence of my family's intent, the bank determined the transfers constituted fraudulent misuse. The frozen funds were returned to me. The civil case took 4 months. My parents had spent approximately $14,000 by the time the freeze hit on flights, the rental, restaurant bills, and what my cousin described as a shopping trip. Patricia filed for full recovery. The judge ordered repayment of the spent amount plus my legal fees structured as a payment plan with interest. My brother moved out of my parents' house within 6 weeks of returning from Las Vegas, which tells you what kind of conversation happened when the vacation ended and the consequences started landing. I want to tell you what I felt when the judge read the order, because I've been asked that question in a few different forms and I want to answer it honestly. I did not feel triumphant. I didn't pump my fist. It wasn't a movie moment. What I felt was tired. Not in a defeated way, and the way you feel tired after you finish something very hard that needed to be done. The kind of tired that has a floor under it. I also felt, underneath that, something I can only describe as grief. Not for the money. The money I was getting back, but for the version of my family I had spent 32 years trying to have, the one where my parents looked at me and saw someone they were proud of without qualification, where my brother was someone I could trust, where the Sunday night phone calls were actually about connection and not intelligence gathering. That family did not exist. It had never existed. I had been building it in my head from scraps they occasionally gave me, and I had been paying in various currencies for the illusion of it. That was the thing that cost me, not $31,800. The decades of trying. I am not in contact with my parents or my brother. My sister sent me a message 8 months after everything settled. Not an apology exactly, more of an acknowledgement, something like I should have said something before it happened. And I read it 3 times and did not respond. I may respond eventually. I haven't decided. My cousin, the one who warned me, came to my apartment for dinner in the fall. We talked for 4 hours. She told me that at Christmas, my mother had told the extended family that I had overreacted to a misunderstanding, that my brother had told people I'd always been cold, that my father had said nothing, which is its own kind of answer. I told my cousin I was okay. She looked at me carefully, the way people do when they're trying to figure out if you mean it. I did mean it. I had gotten promoted that October senior director, which came with a salary jump I had not quite let myself expect. I had also, quietly, started volunteering 2 Saturday mornings a month at a financial literacy nonprofit in Charlotte that works with first-generation college students, helping them understand credit and savings and the kinds of traps that come with being the first person in your family to have money. I found that I was good at it. I found that it made me feel useful in a way that the joint account never had, because this was useful by choice, without debt or obligation attached to it. I had stopped waiting for my family to confirm that my life was worth something. That was the thing that changed. Not a single dramatic moment, not the judge's order, not the day I stopped answering my father's calls. Just a slow internal shift, over months, where I stopped using their silence as information about me. I learned to protect what I built. Not with bitterness. Bitterness would have meant they still had the power to shape how I moved through the world. With clarity. With documentation. With a very good attorney on speed dial. And with the kind of quiet I'd been looking for my whole life. Finally mine. Finally on my terms. They thought they knew what they were taking from me. They had no idea what they were actually up against. I've thought a lot about what it actually means when someone does something like this to you. Not what it says about them. That part becomes obvious fast. But what it reveals about the years leading up to it. Every small thing you overlooked. Every time you told yourself the story was more complicated than it was. My brother didn't drain that account on impulse. Neither did my parents. They planned it for 6 weeks. That kind of thing requires coordination, conversation, agreement. It requires each of them, at some point, to look at the others and say, yes, this is what we're doing. And not one of them stopped to think about what it would cost. Not the money. The relationship. The permanence of what they were choosing. That's the thing about actions taken for short-term relief. They tend to settle into long-term consequence. My brother got 10 days in Las Vegas. What he got afterward was a court order. A debt he'll be paying off for years, and a sister who no longer picks up when he calls. That's not punishment I designed. That's just what happens when you treat trust like a transaction and assume the person on the other end won't do the math. I made mistakes in this story too. I want to be clear about that. I let the arrangement go on longer than I should have. I saw the Venmo transfers and I made a phone call instead of taking action. I told myself the relationship was worth protecting, when what I was actually doing was protecting the idea of the relationship, not the thing itself, which had already been showing me exactly what it was for years. Wisdom, I've learned, is not the absence of mistakes. It's the willingness to stop lying to yourself about what you're seeing. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal. It was recognizing that the version of my family I had been grieving, the close one, the safe one, had never existed in the first place. I had been building that image from small gestures and wishful thinking, and I had been contributing to a joint account, emotionally and financially, that they had been quietly drawing down for years before they finally emptied it all at once. But here's what I know now. I got up from that hotel hallway chair. I went back inside. I presented the next day. I did every single thing I was supposed to do, while quietly setting in motion the consequences they hadn't anticipated. That's not coldness. That's what it looks like when someone has been quietly building resilience their whole life without realizing it, through every dismissal, every Sunday call, every time they were the responsible one without being the valued one. Valerie didn't win because she was smarter or luckier. She won because she had done the work, the actual work, the spreadsheets, the documentation, the years of showing up. And because when it mattered, she didn't let grief make her sloppy. She moved carefully. She moved with integrity. And she let the truth do what truth eventually does when you give it the right tools. You can't always control what people choose to do to you. But you can control what you've built, what you've documented, and who you become on the other side of it. That's the only account that can't be empty without your permission.